this. Let's go now to Mark Meredith in Washington as leaders from both sides of the aisle condemn political violence in the wake of this attack. Hey, Mark.
Charlie, Rachel, and Griff, good morning, friends. Moments ago, we heard from the acting attorney general who said that they believe, the federal government believes, that President Trump and administration officials were the target of last night's attack right here at the Washington Hilton. What struck me this morning is that so much of what was set up last night for the Correspondents' Dinner is still intact, pretty much frozen in time. But so much of the questions today are going to be on the 31-year-old suspect in this case. As you mentioned, a lot of focus on how this was carried out, when the suspect arrived. We also believe he was a guest here of the Washington Hilton. President Trump had quite a bit to say about the incident as he spoke from the White House briefing room before midnight.
In light of this evening's events, I ask that all Americans recommit with their hearts in resolving our difference peacefully. We have to resolve our differences. I will say, you had Republicans, Democrats, independents, conservatives, liberals, and progressives. Yet everybody in that room, big crowd, record-setting crowd. And there was a tremendous amount of love and coming together.
Overnight, media capturing investigators in Torrance, California, searching through the suspect's home, identified as 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen. D.C. police say the man was armed with knives, a shotgun, and a handgun. As I mentioned, also believed to be a guest of the hotel where the event was taking place. Investigators do believe he acted alone, but they are still pouring through what they found on the suspect. We heard overnight from many people across the Washington establishment, including House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who said he was thankful for the swift law enforcement action to protect everyone from gunfire, praying for the safety of those who may remain in harm's way. The violence and chaos in America must end. The president's cabinet secretaries, who were also in attendance, speaking out. We heard from the Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, who said, in the face of such hatred and violence, we are reminded at how much is truly at stake. Our colleague Peter Doocy asked the president about what has now become the second or third attempt, I should say, on his life in just recent years.
Respectfully, why do you think this keeps happening to you?
Well, you know, I've studied assassinations. The people that make the biggest impact, they're the ones that they go after. When you look at the people that have either, whether it was an attempt or a successful attempt, they're very impactful people. I hate to say I'm honored by that, but I've done a lot. We've done a lot. We were a laughingstock for years, and now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We've changed this country. And there are a lot of people that are not happy about that.
There's going to be a lot of questions about a potential motive in this case. We're going to have to wait until the arraignment on Monday, and federal court still trying to understand the charges that this suspect is going to face. But we'll likely know a lot more about what they'll be charged with when he does show up for court on Monday. As the president said last night, he is safe. His team was also very thankful. The question, of course, will be, what will this event look like going forward? As you guys mentioned, the security apparatus getting a lot of review this morning. But the president also going to great lengths to say he trusted the Secret Service, and he believes that they were very brave in protecting him and as well as the few thousand folks who were in attendance last night. Griff, Rachel, and Charlie, back to you guys.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Well, senior White House correspondent Jacqui Heinrich was on the stage with the president, the dais, when shots rang. And she will actually be the president of the White House Press Correspondents Association next year. So what challenges will that bring?
Jacqui joins us now. Jacqui, you are stepping into a role with a lot of questions to be answered, and you have the president saying he wants to reconvene this dinner in 30 days.
I'm not sure how we're going to pull that off. I mean, this takes a year to plan, and my colleague on the board, Weijia Jiang of CBS, who's the president of the association this year, my heart goes out to her because she put a lot of time and effort into leading the planning for this year's event, which was her job. I don't know how we'll be able to pull off the president's wish to redo this within 30 days. I'm sure every effort will be made to try to make that happen. For next year, you know, I spoke to the president last night because you heard him mention in his remarks in the press briefing room about the need for the ballroom. And I said, when Fox, you know, is the host, when Fox helps put on the dinner next year, when I'm the president of the association and we help to host that night, you know, the ballroom's not going to be ready, I don't think, is it? And he said, no, it should be ready the year after. So we've got at least one more year after this rescheduled event from last night to figure out how do we do this again? You know, this is not the first time there have been challenges at that hotel, purely because it is a hotel. A couple years ago, I was on the board of the association. This is my 4th or 5th year on the board, and Joe Biden was president, and there was a Gaza protester, similarly, that was a hotel guest that planned to come in and disrupt the evening. Likewise, that person never made it into the ballroom. It was not quite as much of a scene, but you do have challenges when you have hotel guests that are staying in the same building as a big event like that draws 3,000 people. There are thousands of rooms in that hotel. I don't know what decisions can be made that would better protect against threats like that. But I do have to say, the security protocol worked as it was supposed to. The threat never got close to the room. We were, multiple levels of security inside. And all the chaos and mayhem really stemmed from the law enforcement response. We weren't sure at the moment, if the threat was contained. And it took them some time, understandably, to ensure that there were not other threats in the room. This wasn't some sort of a coordinated event. And so being up there on the stage and just seeing the throng of law enforcement coming toward us, not knowing in the moment what it was, and then having Secret Service agents come out from behind us on the stage and swoop the vice president off the stage from next to me, I was laying there for a few minutes, not really knowing what was going on. And the scariest part for me was hearing the agents with their guns drawn, standing over me, talking to each other and saying, "Do you see it? Are you tracking it?" And having the other one answer no. And in that moment, we didn't know if it was because there was no threat or they just couldn't get their eyes on it. And that's when I got the nod from the agent that I could crawl in my dress behind the stage, the backstage area where we waited for more updates.
Jacqui, a lot of people saying they were surprised at how long the president was on the stage. I mean, we saw J.D. Vance sort of quickly removed, but a lot of people looked up and said, why is he still there? Did you have that impression? I mean, you were probably one of the people closest to him.
I didn't have that impression. It's a matter of seconds between when agents swooped in from, they came into the stage from the side of it where the vice president and I were sitting. And you saw an agent pull the vice president off and more agents make their way over to the president. I believe there were also agents coming in toward the president from the side of the stage that he was on, the area where they pulled him out. And remember, the First Lady is also over there. The press secretary was also on that side. She's, about to give birth to her second child. She's very pregnant right now. And getting them off the stage as well was the job for the agents on that side of the table. It was a matter of seconds between when the agents took the vice president off and when President Trump was escorted. And it was really too quick to feel like there was anything to note, any sort of difference between how they treated the president and the vice president.
No,
I just saw them all swoop onto the stage.
I wasn't implying that there was a difference between J.D., the vice president, and the president, but just that there were people who were already on the ground in the venue, and then looking up and seeing that the president was still seated was jarring.
Well, I think that's because they came into the room from the back. I mean, we were along one side of the room on the stage, and all of us, including the president, the vice president, were watching a throng of agents barreling towards us and starting to climb over tables, and that's when simultaneously agents started to descend onto the stage from behind us. It all happened very quickly, but also, as you know, when you're in it, it feels like it's slow motion.
So as wild and surreal as it was for us, we were kind of, we were at a lower vantage point, so we really couldn't even see what was going on. I would think it would have been even more surreal for you because you're up on a dais, you're elevated, you can see all of it unfolding, and you're like, what? And all these people rushing towards you with guns. What in the world is going on? Two quick questions. One is, were you able? I mean, so the president is like on the image on the screen right there. The president is what, 2 seats past that that shot you took there. When you were sitting there, we all seem to have heard something. Were you able to make out? Did it internalize in your brain that was shots fired? First question. Second thing is, were you close enough to hear, the president, the first lady, the mentalist O's were all in a conversation when this unfolded? Were you close enough to pick up what that conversation was about when all of this unfolded?
I believe I know what that conversation was about, even though I was not close enough to hear it, because the vice president was seated to my right and the mentalist was seated to my left. And minutes before all this happened, O's was talking to me and to the vice president about wanting to perform a magic trick on President Trump. And he asked me and the vice president for the name of a person, dead or alive, who we would like to interview, and said after he got our answers and we wrote it down on a piece of paper and hid it, the vice president tore it in two pieces and hid it in his pockets as O's instructed him to do. I took mine and put it in my purse as I was instructed to do. And then O's went down the stage to get the responses from the president and the First Lady, and I believe that's what he was asking them in that moment when all of this then happened. We couldn't tell from the stage immediately what it was. I did hear some clanging. I thought it was plates or maybe a table collapsing. It was only when we saw the agents rushing toward us and starting to come up over tables, and then the agents come out from behind us on the stage with their guns drawn, that it became very clear this was a security situation. And the president and vice president were taken off, and I was still laying there on the stage because we're elevated from the rest of the crowd. And I was regretting that I didn't grab my phone to bring it down with me so I could text people and let them know I was all right. I know my mom was watching, on TV from home. My fiance was right there at one of our Fox tables in the crowd, and I wanted to let them know I was all right. And I was thinking to myself, am I flat enough? Because if there is a threat in the crowd, we're elevated from the rest of the room, and we weren't sure at that moment if someone was going to pop up. And hearing the agents talking to each other and saying, do you see it? Are you tracking anything? And the answer was no. It was unclear for a moment if there was still a threat in the room. It became quickly clear that there was not.
A surreal and frightening situation. Jacqui Heinrich, senior White House correspondent, thank you for sharing your insights.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.